Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inspired by Design, episode 29. I'm Julie Turberg, and I'm here with Nolan Hames. Hi,
Hey,
Nolan.
Julie, how are you? Hi,
Uh,
how you
for
doing?
those of you who don't know, I'm going to introduce Nolan. He has over 20 years of experience in the field of visual communications and presentation, having created every type of presentation from Fortune 500 CEO keynotes to TED Talks to multi-million dollar agency pitches. Nolan trains organizations to think visually. He speaks at national conferences, writes on visual storytelling at presentyourstory.com. Nolan is also a co-host of our favorite podcast, the Presentation Podcast. He's a fellow Microsoft PowerPoint MVP and a proud member of the Guild from day one. Welcome, Nolan.
Thank you, Julie.
So you're going to
So,
talk to us about pie charts today, huh?
yeah, so we're going to talk about pie charts, alternatives to pie charts. Shout out and thank you to Echo, who I think suggested this topic. So, yeah, let's just get right into it and let's talk about pie charts. First of all, I am not one of those never pie chart people. There are some people who insist there's never a good use of a pie chart. I do use pie charts. I just use them very rarely and very sparingly because I think the cases where a pie chart makes most sense are few and far between, I guess. But I will say when I do use a pie chart, I think 80% of the time it's because the client insists on it. I've shown them something else, but they insist on the pie chart. We all have mortgages and rent to pay. So if a client insists on it, at the end of the day, they're the boss. But about 20% of those times, I do think it's the effective choice, and I will go ahead and suggest that. So that's sort of just setting it up to begin with. It's a very small slice for me, that 20%, because for me to use a pie chart, I really think it has to have no more than 4 slices max. Usually for me, it's just 2 or 3 slices. The part to the whole has got to be really crucial to the storytelling. And the concept of 100% whole also has to be really important, not just there, but really crucial to the storytelling. So we've all seen things like this, right? And I look at this and immediately it's breaking my 2 to 4 slice rule. So it's not going to be a pie chart. But I want to talk a little bit about why pie charts are so ineffective. We can sort of instinctively know it's ugly and hard to look at, but it makes, when you have this many slices, it makes comparison incredibly difficult, right? I mean, these non-adjacent slices and the angle of the slice, which is how you determine value in a pie chart, they're just incredibly hard to read and determine. Now, if this was your data set and you had your heart set on a pie chart, you can manipulate your data into a version that would be okay for a pie chart. So you can always combine slices, right? You can always combine a whole bunch of slices into the other category. So in this case, I think 2 to 3 slices, part to the whole is important. I think these are good uses of pie charts. So those ones on the right, I would be okay with. But when we get into things like this, as I said, actually determining value of pie slices visually is incredibly difficult. Julie, can I put you on the spot here?
Sure, Nolan.
Okay. I show this to my trainees all the time, this pie chart, and I'm going to ask you. I've highlighted 3 of the slices to make it a little easier for you.
Okay.
But can you rank for me in order, confidently, Honda, Nissan, and Chrysler Group?
I think Chrysler is a little smidge bigger,
Okay.
but Nissan and Honda look equal to me.
Okay. Try this. Just what percentage do you think Honda is?
I'm going to guess 8.
Okay. That was actually a pretty good guess, but you just weren't confident. It's just too difficult. If we look at the same pie chart in my go-to data visualization, which is a lot of people probably know is the bar chart, if we take the same data set, instead of using a pie chart, go with the bar. Now,
Ah,
this is pretty easy. Rank for me Chrysler, Honda, Nissan. Honda, Nissan were not the same, and Honda was 10%, so you were pretty close. But it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, the bar chart, I think, is probably the most effective sort of go-to chart because it makes comparison so easy. And that, at the end of the day, that's what you really need to think about. Is the point of your data story to compare and to rank things? And generally, most of the times, yes, you want to see who's bigger than the other. You want to see who's on top. And bar charts make that so easy. Pie charts make it so difficult to determine, the ranking order, essentially. And some people will say, oh, well, Nolan, I need to use a pie chart because all my data adds up to 100%. And to that, I always say, who cares? I mean, genuinely, who cares? Because again, most people don't care. If that's important, you can put a little note down in the corners. You can see data adds up to 100%. But when I showed that World Series win pie chart, did you care that all of them added up to 100%? No, you just wanted to know who had more wins than the other. So people care about what they care about, and pie charts just make that harder to do. So that's a bar chart, and bar chart, column chart. I'm gonna say those are basically the same thing for our purposes here today. A variant of the bar chart or column chart is the stacked bar or stacked column. So we could take that same pie chart, the same data set of all the car manufacturers, and do it as a stacked bar, or in this case, a stacked column, for a different purpose. Again, like, what is the real point of your data visualization? You got to determine that to pick the right chart. But this is another really good alternative, one that I use all the time. In this case, we're categorizing, 3 categories by, region of the world. And in addition, we're also still ranking all of them. I think last or a couple webinars ago, we talked about manual charts. And this is when I do stacked bars or stacked columns, I usually often just build them manually. That last one actually, I think was a real chart, but this one, this stacked bar, was just manually created. So you can go watch that webinar.
Yeah, and I just have to say, once again, just popping that licensing up just a smidge like that, I mean, you've got a focal point. You can see the relationship between all of these elements and their sizes instantly. It's much more effective than pulling out a slice of a pie, isn't it?
Right, yes. And again, when you make a manual chart like this one, that's just stupid simple. You just like lift it up. If this was a real chart, it would be harder to do that. So let's look at another use case of pie charts. This is one that unfortunately I actually do see a lot. It's where people have a mix, or like in this case, sort of a sales mix, and they want to chart how that's changed over time. And so if you are trying to compare one pie chart to another pie chart, just give up right now. It is not possible for people to retain all these things in their head. Here, you might be able to muddle through with the legend and figure out retail sales. They went down, they went up, and they went down, a lot. But then if you try to compare that with web sales, you're trying to keep like 8 numbers at least in 2 different categories in your head. You can't do it. So if you ever have a trend, a series, definitely don't use pie charts. I don't care if they have only 2 slices or 3 slices each. That's where you might consider going to a line chart. Generally, if you have a trend, that's kind of what line charts are built to do, to show trend. And now you can see immediately who's on top, who's in the middle, who's on the bottom, how things have changed, how they've trended. And again, does this all add up to 100%? Yes, you can put a note in the corner, but who cares? I mean, that's not really the main point of this chart. People want to compare and see trends. If that idea of sort of 100%, you really want to see like that's the full mix, you can go to a variant of a line chart, which is a 100% area chart. I use these every once in a while, usually only with 2 slices, because if you get more than 2 slices, really, after that first slice on the bottom, it's really hard to see the trend, like of retail sales or web sales. Like, does web sales end up higher or lower than where it started? Visually, it's kind of hard to see, right?
This has always been confusing to me. I don't understand how web sales, what has happened with web sales. There is no definite, like you said, trend. It just
Right.
fills in the gap.
Right. And so if you have 2 slices only, 100% area can actually be quite nice. And again, it depends on your data. When you have sort of 3 kind of equal areas, it's just less effective. But it's an option. And again, every once in a while, we'll use a 100% area. Okay. I can't get through any webinar these days without a jackalope chart. So back to what might be an okay pie chart. 4 slices, right? So it's kind of okay. They're ranked, and it's not terrible. But here's an alternative to a pie chart. This is the one that I probably go to most if I kind of know the client really has their heart set on pies. it's the cousin to the pie chart, which is the donut chart. Now, some people will say it's really no different. It is a little different. Well, A, you get that cute little place in the center where you can put your question or big numbers or a little jackalope. But with a pie chart, as I said before, the value is determined by angle of the pie slice, and the human brain is incredibly bad at determining what that is. But in a donut chart, it's actually determined, values determined by the length of that donut slice. Now it's curved, which makes it, harder to compare and everything than a bar chart, but it's still, and I think, like I said, there's actually been some research that it's easier for the eye to determine length here, so rather than angle, because angle is just, again, it's really hard to determine, as we saw with the Honda example up front. So,
But even at a glance, Nolan, the 189 and 145 look very close.
Exactly.
As do the 61 and 51.
Exactly. So if I didn't have numbers on here and coloring and everything, it would be, yes, it's not perfect, but I think it's definitely better than a pie chart. And I do use donut charts, definitely more than pie charts, and in those cases, in some cases. Also, not everybody even knows how to make donut charts for working in Excel and PowerPoint, even though they're very simple and they're built in, so you don't see them quite as much. This was a data report we did a while back, in which I think every bit of data here came to us as a pie chart. And you'll see that the first three questions, the first three results we did as donut charts. The bottom left two we did as column charts. Again, they came to us as pie charts, but I'm almost never going to get a pie chart from a client and turn it back to them as a pie chart. I'm always going to generally try to do something a little cleaner, more effective, more interesting. Down at the bottom right, that could easily have been a pie chart. It's just two slices, male and female, but we went with a unit chart, and that with little icons. And that's a good transition to the next option for a pie chart. This we just did last week for a client, and this is essentially how it came to us, or they sent us pie charts. And they're not bad, right? Two slices, just, part to a whole is important. But instead of the pie chart, we went with what's called a waffle chart, right? Everything's got to be named after a food, right? So I like waffle charts a lot, and I'm finding clients really like them also. How do you create these? We talked about this in the previous webinar on manual charts. You have to build them manually. I just use a grid of 100 squares and color them in. Julie, I know you often create tables, like a 10 by 10 table, and then just fill in the cells. Either way is totally fine, but it's not built in. Like, you can't just choose waffle chart and put in the data. But even that said, I think they're very simple to create and edit. And visually now, it works almost like 100% stacked column, where you can easily, like at a glance, easily visually see that 35 is less than 50 and 50 is much more than 21%.
And I think visually they work so much better to tell you how much of, how much that particular, how much of 100, like you said, because it's angular units versus a percent, because that whole angle is so difficult to tell on the previous slide.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if somebody's really concerned, as you said, about, well, I have to show that there's 100%, what percentage of that is, this doesn't. This definitely shows part to a whole, and that 100% is there. So yeah, so most of the time when I give somebody this instead of a pie chart, they're totally fine. They don't push back. A lot of times if I give them a bar chart instead of a pie chart, they'll tend to push back a little bit more.
No, these are great.
I kind of had a little fun with this. This I did a long time ago when I was sort of playing with waffle charts. You can do more than two slices, two categories. Like here we did 3 categories, and it's interesting. I think I don't know if it's maybe the best thing I ever did, but I kind of had fun with, we did a whole series of slides like this with different categories and shading in different squares. So
hey, can you back up one slide?
Yeah, sure.
Count your squares on the 21.
Oh, that's wrong.
Thanks, Laura.
Whoops,
Laura
whoops.
Foley just pointed that out. You need to edit your slide.
Thank you, Laura.
Good eye,
Oh,
Laura.
I hope that didn't. I hope this is not the version that went to the
Right,
client.
right.
There's a
It's
lot of cut.
probably
There
the
was a
one
lot
you've
of
just,
cutting and pasting to get here. So
I
thank you
think
very
it's
much
just the one you've done in
for
the
pointing
guild
that out.
template for
Yeah, I
sure.
think so. Thanks.
Hmm.
Yeah, so again, this was just a grid of 100 squares. I'm going to move past this quickly before Laura finds a problem with this one. So, all right, so the last sort of major type of chart that I'll substitute for a pie chart is what's called a tree map. And so in this case, we've got 6 or 7 slices or so. This represents millions of dollars of giving. This is a really simple change. It's built in as of a couple years ago. You just go change chart and you select tree map and you get this. Now, this is what's called it's a category of new charts. They appeared a couple years ago. The category is called an Ivy chart, although you won't see that listed anywhere. But these are things like waterfall charts or the stock charts or sunburst. Just a warning, while I like tree maps a lot, they don't have quite, all these Ivy charts don't have quite the control that you might expect of charts, for example, with labeling. So in this case, my labels are all manual. I still think tree maps are good, although for whatever reason, I don't seem to use them as much as I used to. But they're really good, and you can have lots of different categories and slices. This is the default. For if you just do insert tree map, you get this, and you can see you can have what's called branches and then leaves. So you can have these big categories or branches, and then within that, smaller categories. And just tree maps were created years ago to show memory usage on computers. So you might, if you have any sort of software that shows you that, or what parts of your computer are being taken up, sometimes you'll see that done in tree maps. So again, another really good option, especially I think if you have lots of categories for that. So I always like to show this example of just really the difference between in effectiveness between a pie chart and something else. In this case, a column chart. I used to work in the PR industry where share of voice was really, really important. Share of voice essentially is how much media attention you're getting. And almost without exception, everyone does it as pie charts because they think, well, this is 100% of media attention to this industry or this set of clients, and I want to show my client what slice they're getting. But this was a real slide that was about to go to a client, and if I asked you who's the client, first of all, you'd have no idea here because
No idea.
no idea. It's JetBlue, and so we wanted to show how JetBlue ranked compared to everyone else. And just staring at this, it's really, really difficult to do. Where do they land? How are they doing? But if we split these up into 2 column charts, now who's the client and how are they doing? It's in about a quarter of a second, you get the answer to that question. That's how they're doing in print. How are they doing online? Killing it for their size.
So much clearer.
Yeah, so I always say people care about what they care about. You go and talk to JetBlue, they don't care about the 100%. They just want to know how they're ranking.
But
So
along with
yeah.
changing that to a bar chart, Nolan, by simply changing all of the competitors to grayscale and calling out JetBlue in the darker color, you have instantly focused our eyes on what we care about. What is the point of
Exactly.
this? What is the point of this chart? So,
And that's what it all has to come down to, which somebody just yesterday sent me a spaghetti line chart, said, hey, can you make this look better? Thinking I'd probably say, yeah, sure, I'll take it. I sent back a list of 5 or 6 questions. Who are you presenting to? What's the story? What do you want to focus on? You've got to know all that stuff in order to design the chart. And in that case, believe it or not, I said, once they answered everything, I said, often with these, we make small multiples. And she said, oh, no, we don't want that. We just want to see one chart. I said, okay, I hear you. I sent back one, better spaghetti chart, and I sent back small multiples all split out. And she said, thank you so much. The small multiples are so much better. We were wrong. You were right. So that was a little win. Until people actually see the difference, until people actually see an alternate to the pie chart, sometimes they just can't comprehend how it can be better. So these are my rules. I always get somebody whenever I'm training that says, well, wait a minute, when can we use pie charts? And it's like, okay, here, here are my rules. Julie, you might have some additions to this, but my rules are 2 to 4 slices max. Usually for me, it's about 3 slices. Again, have I done 5 or 6 slice pie charts? I have, when the client has absolutely insisted on it. So don't feel bad, you know, when you have to bow to the client. Start at 12 o'clock. If the pie does not automatically start at 12 o'clock, you can, in the controls, you can set the angle of the first slice, and you can just tell it where to go. So sometimes you have to do that. Rank your values clockwise at the very least, you know, so we know the biggest, smallest, and around the horn. And as I said, just because your data adds up to 100% doesn't mean you need a pie chart. But if you're going to use a pie chart,
It has to.
has to add up to 100%. That's
You know,
you can't argue on that.
I'm going to add one more thing to this list. If you have to use a pie chart, be careful with the values that you use for the slices. Make sure that one of your slices is not much lighter, brighter, or darker than all the others, because it's going to stand out and look like it's highlighted.
You mean color values?
Color values.
Color values.
You know, when you're using shades of one value, that's fine. Make sure that 2 of them are not super close to each other in value unless they're separated by a line. Be careful with the values of your pie charts.
Do you ever use the change colors and the monochromatic gradient effect in PowerPoint?
I do use monochromatic, but then I always go in and tweak those values because they're never right.
Well, I mean, you can always set like charts to vary points by color, which gives you this, you know, crazy, you know, rainbow bright thing. But under change colors, you can do that as well with different color palettes. But at the bottom, you can assign basically a gradient based on value. So if you have like a ranked bar chart, it'll go, as it goes down, it gets lighter. And sometimes I like doing that for bar charts. If you do that for pie charts, to your point, sometimes the shades are just too close to each other and you just can't tell.
Almost always we go in and we tweak the colors and very specifically indicate which values we're going to use.
Yeah. So on this last point, I'll finish off by showing you two of my favorite and infamous pie charts. Violating that last rule about everything has to add up to 100%. The one on the left has been around for a long time. The one on the right, I think, is only about a year old, and but that's a good one too. So well, yeah, so be careful.
Yeah, Jude has another rule. She says never use a 3D pie. You know, I think that's one of those rules that are unspoken a lot lately because we all feel the same way, Jude. That 3D pies should be banished.
And the reason why 3D pies are terrible is because of perspective. So the more 3D it is, the slices closer to you visually look bigger, and the slices farther away look smaller. So
it's so misleading.
It's distorting.
Well, I think that's it I don't see any other questions. Dave actually mentioned that he was good for you for throwing that in there to see if they were paying attention. Everyone's paying attention.
Okay, now I'm going to start doing that every time, Laura.
If we have any last minute questions, pop them up in the chat and the questions panel, and I will ask Nolan. Anything else, Nolan, on alternatives to pies? This was great.
No, and this was only 7. Like there are lots of others. There's, you know, for series, there's if you have like the trend instead of the line chart, you could do slope charts. There are lots of different options. These are sort of 7 of my go-tos.
More tools for our toolkit. Thank you.
Exactly.
I appreciate it. So I have a couple of housekeeping reminders. We have a book club discussion coming up next week for our current book selection, Data Story by Nancy Duarte. And this will be chapter 9 through the end next week, February 18th. Don't miss that. Oh, and then the author chat with Nancy is coming up on March 3rd, another don't miss book club discussion. We have a guild gathering on Monday, February 24th. So if you just want to get online and chat amongst all of us about our favorite subject presentations, join us for the Guild Gathering. The next episode of Inspired by Design is going to be on March 10th, which is a totally different day of the week for us, but we have to take care of other things that have popped up. So March 10th is our next date. And I'm going to be starting a new series on design principles and how to use what you need to know about some of them and how to apply them to your presentations.
I'm
So
looking
join
forward to
us
it.
for that. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nolan. And we look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thanks, Julie.
Bye, everybody.